Very good evening, everyone. On behalf of IAP India technical team, I, Dr. Jaspreet, welcome you all. I welcome our today's speaker, Dr. Shobik Rai sir, and our today's guest of honor is Dr. Rajan Samuel sir, CEC South Zone. He is Principal Vinayaka Mission College. Sir is very senior academician. We welcome you, sir. And our today's moderator is Dr. Kaushik Malik sir. Before hand over to Dr. Kaushik sir, I request all the participants please like and subscribe IAP India YouTube channel and Facebook page. Over to Dr. Kaushik sir, please moderate this session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone, and very warm welcome to our sixth webinar organized by IAP West Bengal and Women's Cell. On behalf of IAP West Bengal branch, I do welcome you all the participants for the PNA principle and procedure. Now I want to introduce our organizer, our secretary, Arindam sir, please say something.
Good evening, everybody. I cordially welcome Rajan Samuel sir, CEC South Zone. Welcome, sir. Thank you for giving a time to us and motivate us for the doing better for the future. I cordially welcome today's speaker, Dr. Shovik Roy, a young and eminent physiotherapist in the West Bengal. So I cordially welcome Dr. Shovik. I cordially welcome Dr. Rishi Raj, our CEC East Zone, for giving a nice time with us and giving and motivating us for the doing for the better. I cordially welcome our beloved colleagues, Somashil Maiti, Dr. Kaushik Malik. He is taking the responsibility for each and every time to conducting the webinar. Thank you, Kaushik, for your effort. I welcome the Tanusri Bhattacharya, our Women's Cell coordinator. Thank you, Tanusri, for giving a nice time with us and coordinating all those hurdles to doing the webinar. I'm thankful to the IAP technical team and the CEC for giving us a time and keep motivating us for doing better. Thank you.
Thank you, Arindam.
Thank you.
Now I want to ask to say something. Dr. Rishi Raj, please say something.
Good evening, everyone. First, I would like to congrats IAP technical team and our panelists, Dr. Samarnika, Dr. Uttara, Dr. Alopi, Dr. Jaspreet, Dr. Vinod, Jogesh, Dr. Himadri, Dr. Richa, and Dr. Bhavna. And also, I'd like to thanks Dr. Sobik for this wonderful, for conducting this PNF principles and procedures. So I would like to best wishes for him. Or also I said to thanks Rajan sir for coming from this state webinar. So I would like to thanks again Rajan sir and all this state team for conducting this wonderful webinar. So thanks.
Thank you, Rishi. Now our chief guest, Dr. Rajan sir. Rajan sir, please say something.
Yes. Yeah, very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I would like to congratulate the West Bengal state branch for winning the elections and taking up responsibility for the state. And I also congratulate the Women's Cell of West Bengal. And I really am very happy to understand that you're all doing a good job, and with all the support from the central side, we are all with you, and definitely we'll be able to help you in whatever activities you do for the profession. And I'm really happy to understand that you are organizing a webinar, and that too we have a very famous and eminent personality, Dr. Shovik Roy, to talk to us about the PNF practices. So, and I'm very happy to see my friend Rishi here, and I think he'll be able to support you in all your activities as because he belongs to your zone. And congratulations for all of you. And I think like it's a great work. And this particular topic and this person like is specialized in neurodynamics. Okay, it's a very important area where most of the physiotherapists do not have the real knowledge. They do not know what is a nerve mobilization. They do not know to work on specific nerve mobilization. And I think like it is a really wonderful topic. And I think like this will definitely improve the functional activity of our patients. And probably a wonderful seminar. So I thank for giving me an opportunity to join you all. And thank you very much for the opportunity and a great seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Such a nice, inspiring talk. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to, Tanushree, please say something.
Hello, good evening all. And we from Women's Cell will like to cordially invite our CC Drs. Rajan Samuel from South Zone and CC East Zone Dr. Rishi Raj. It's a very good thing that we know our PNF means Dr. Shobhik Roy. So we are very happy to organize another webinar on behalf of him. So maybe all of the participants will learn a lot of things regarding neuromobilization and PNF. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you,
all
Tanushree.
the
Thank you.
delegates.
Now, Somasil, please say something and introduce us, Shobhik Roy. Thank you, Somasil.
Hi, welcome you all to the 7th webinar in a series by IIP West Bengal branch. And I also thankful to the IIP technical team because without their technical support, we couldn't able to conduct webinars so far successfully. And I also showing my gratitude towards Dr. Rajan Samuel sir, Dr. Sanjeev Jha sir, Dr. Ruchi ma'am, Lily John sir, and sabke apne our own Dr. Rishi Raj for giving such a good platform to sharing knowledge in such a horrible pandemic situation where we stay home and keep physical distance is only the best solution we have. And I lastly cordially welcome the eminent personality of West Bengal in the field of rehabilitation who proved himself in such a young age and who has been the resource person for several workshops and conference of NDT, PNF, cardiac rehabilitation. Dr. Shobhik Roy, MPD from Neurosciences, at present working as a consultant physical therapist at NH Rabindranath Tagore International Institute of Cardiac Sciences, Kolkata, with clinical experience of almost 7 years, and is certified in NDT for adult population from NDTA, certified in PNS level 1 and level 2 from IPNFA, certified in clinical neurodynamics, certified in cupping, kinetics and dry needling, clinical trainer of ReWalk India, the first exoskeleton robot of India for paraplegics, FAG from Manipal. Now Dr. Shobhik, up to you.
Thank you, Somasil. Shobhik sir, please, you can start your session.
Should I share?
Yes.
Okay. Is it visible to all?
Yes. No, screen sharing does not happen now. Yes, it's coming. Thank you.
Coming?
Yes.
Okay.
Sir, please
Very good evening to all of you.
Yeah, it's fine.
Everything fine? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for such a nice introduction, sir. And I would like to show my gratitude, and I'm very much privileged to be here among you all in this deadly pandemic, as sir has already told. And thanks IIP, thanks a lot for creating such a platform for where one can share his ideas, his experiences, his knowledge, and at the same time one can learn a lot. Every day so many webinars are going on, so we can even take home message from all these webinars, which can bring a lot of improvement in our clinical day-to-day practice, and eventually we can help our patient to get better. So without wasting any much time, let's start today's topic, that is PNF, principles and procedures. I kept the topic like PNF principle and procedure because most of the time we are talking about only PNF patterns and techniques, all these sort of things, but less regarding all these conceptual matters, the philosophy behind PNF, how it has evolved, and nowadays we can say that it's a strongest tool for our for us only, all the physios, if it's come to rehabilitation of patients with neurological impairments, disorders, and orthopedic injuries, post-op rehabilitations, even in cardiac rehab also we are using PNF. For facial issues, facial paralysis, we are using PNF. So now it's a multi-dimensional kind of thing we are using worldwide. So let's start PNF history. As all of you know, you have heard the name of the who have developed this concept, Dr. Herman Kabat and Maggie Knott, in the late or early 1940s. As a mean of rehabilitation for neurologically disorders such as multiple sclerosis, CP, and poliomyelitis. It was that previous time that they are dealing with such disabilities, but nowadays, as I told you, it's using we are using PNF in orthopedic rehabilitation, post-op injuries of least on-field stretching techniques of PNF, and many other things in cardiopulmonary rehabilitations also. So what happened at that time, Dr. Herman Kabat was he was a neurologist. He was working with some patients, and he saw that handling in the patient in the distal part of the hand is bringing some kind of influence and some kind of facilitation in the proximal part. So since then that idea has become, and he started working with Maggie Knott later on, and Dorothy Voss has came, and they have started this concept in a very nice way. And now we are using this concept in almost every field of rehabilitation. So if we're talking about PNF definition, so many definitions are there everywhere. Someone is telling it's a kind of stretching program we are using to bring our patients onto their daily life by bringing more mobility, more flexibility. But what I can say, if you can break it into parts like proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, and if you can break it, proprioceptive means all of us know that having to do something like with our sensory receptors in our joints, in our muscles, in the form of Golgi tendon and muscle spindles. So next one is neuromuscular, which involves definitely the nerves and the muscles, the main neuromuscular system, the neuromuscular junction, the synapses, everything, whatever that comprise of the nerves and muscles, even the central nervous system who is controlling the muscle contraction. So it came under the neuromuscular system. And the last, facilitation. To facilitate means making things easier. So now if we bring all this together, it comes like with the help of this proprioceptive inputs, we are facilitating the neuromuscular system, or if you can say facilitating the neuromuscular system with the help of proprioceptors. So proprioceptors are very much important in day-to-day life. As we know, we are walking, we are talking, for any kind of gesture, proprioception is needed, because it sends us the signals, it sends us information regarding where our limbs are in the space, or else we can't walk even, we will fall every time we stood up. Like you have heard of proprioceptive system, all the sensory systems, proprioceptive system, visual system, vestibular system. So amongst all, I think proprioceptive system plays a very vital role in this. So I guess we are pretty clear with this definition. Let's see the next slide. Okay, as I was speaking, like from my undergraduate days, not only mine, even all of us, we know PNF as PNF patterns, D1 and D2, all these things, flexion, extension, all these things. But we basically, to be honest, we speak very less about all these things which are behind this core concept of PNF, like the ICF model. We know how we divided into that participation level, activity level, impairment level. We are setting goals according to that only. And next one is assessment and treatment goals. Without setting goals, nobody can succeed in their rehabilitation process. Next is clinical reasoning. There is for everything there must be reasoning. We set hypotheses and later on we justify that kind of thing. And next one is clinimetry. That means it's like the prior treatment we're doing some kind of test. If you can say MMD prior and after the rehabilitation process, prior and after taking measurements, like in case of an example of paraplegics, how much he can reach forward, or even after the session, you can measure again that how much forward he is going after the session. So, phases motor control, we have respect in all the time that there's a motor control. I guess all of us know what is motor control. We grew up from the very infant stage, from the very beginning, how we have gone the stability and on top of that mobility and the skill enhancement, all these things we knew very well, but we never thought of those things in another way. Like we have to think by coming out of the box. Okay, so next is motor learning new things. Even after brain injury, we know the how the process of motor learning is taking place, the cognitive phase, the associative phase, and the automaticity again comes after that. So we'll discuss in details a little bit, not too much, because we are having very less amount of time. Within one hour, we have to face a lot of part. And frankly speaking, we are not going into patterns today, not at all. And we'll speak regarding all the other things except the patterns. The last thing is evidence-based practice. Nowadays, everyone is doing evidence-based practice in the field of physical therapy and rehabilitation, we know. So let's come to the next slide. As I told you, we have to respect each and every stage of motor control. So let's see, we can see mobility, capacity, stability, control, mobility, and skill. So what are these things coming under mobility capacity? There is range of motion, strength, motor control, etc. If you're talking about stability, what comes? Standing on one leg, sitting in a chair. Control mobility, walking, propelling, chair on level surfaces. Skill, running with talking something, running with handling few things with your hands, like all these sort of things. So you can see the mobility is far upward, like he's lifting the weight, but the stability is provided by the lower limbs. He's getting all the stability from the lower limbs. So that is what we want to say, that every time you are treating a patient, you have to keep in mind the stability part, and that should be on the top of mobility. If there is no stability, you will not be succeeded in making your patient like very much fit in their activities of daily living. You can't expect mobility without a stability. When you grew up, if you can follow the developmental stages, like you started with quadruped position, then gradually with closed kinetic chains and all, you have started walking. But before walking, you went through a long process to gain those stability kind of things. So what are the motor control stages of motor control? As I told you, the cognitive stage, here the patient has to think about all the happenings surrounding him. He has to think for everything. His demand is cognitive load. The next stage is associative. Here the patient tries to bring solutions to the difficulties, and the last stage, autonomous stage, here everything will be coming automatically. He doesn't have to think that much. And the most important thing is the cognitive part is you have to allow the patient to make errors. Unless and until the patient making errors, he is not going to learn the things. And a lot of repetitions, as all of us know, whenever it comes for motor learning, we are focusing on the repetition parts for making him master skills. So this is just a schematic diagram. You can see the cognitive stage, the associative stage, and the autonomous stage, and just see the attention part. It's maximum in the cognitive and it's declining gradually. So we are telling that PNF concept is everything has some contribution to build up this PNF concept. And if you are talking about motor control, this is where we are lying whenever we are treating our patient with PNF concept, hands-on PNF, visual, verbal. So we are lying this principles of PNF, these procedures of PNF are lying in the cognitive phase and of the associative phase. So another thing, all these neurophysiological principles taken from the work of Sir Charles Harrington in those 1940s. We can't forget all those things. So he has done a big contribution to PNF concept by providing his all these researches. So let's have a look at neurophysiological principles. The first one is after discharge. So what is after discharge? So the effect of stimulus continue after stimulus stops. So I have given a picture just on the background. You can see he is doing exercise of the biceps. So the more he will keep on doing all these exercises, even after stopping the gym, if he went back home, he can find his biceps to be as big as in the screen. So what is this? This is only after discharge. It starts, it's keep on continuing. The more you give the resistance, the more will be the after discharge. The principle says this only. So what is the temporal summation and spatial summation? These are also very important for the concept of PNF. So what is temporal summation? A succession of weak stimulus occurring within a certain period of time combined to cause excitation. Multiple weak stimuli working together to bring on a excitation, what it says actually. And another is spatial summation, weak stimulus applied simultaneously from all over the body, and they reinforces presynaptically to bring a change postsynaptically. Let's have a look on the diagram. So above one is spatial summation. You can see the weak stimulus, multiple weak stimulus, 1, 2, 3, all these combined together to produce a postsynaptic neuron fire. And here, if you can see temporal summation, high frequency stimulation by only one presynaptic neuron, and it's producing postsynaptic neuron fires. So this is the difference in temporal summation, only a weaker high frequency stimulation by one presynaptic neuron. And in the case of spatial summation, there are multiple presynaptic neurons firing to bring one postsynaptic neuron fires. So another most important thing of this PNF philosophy and procedures like irradiation. What is irradiation? We use a lot this irradiation process. So let's have a look on this. This is a spread and increased strength of response. It occurs when either the number of stimuli or strength of stimuli is increased. The response may be excitation or inhibition. So it's the spreading and increased strength of response. If you are resisting some part, basically we are treating the weaker part of our body with the strongest part. So we'll have some picture demonstration for that. We'll show that thing. Just for an example, if a patient comes to you with weakness in the dorsiflexor of the foot. So in that case, how we use this irradiation process, we can resist the proximal part of the lower limb to bring some facilitation in the dorsiflexion. So this is how it works. So we'll have a in-depth discussion regarding this. Another is successive induction, an increased excitation of agonist muscles followed by stimulation of their antagonist. If there is an increased excitation of the agonist muscles, there will be stimulation of the antagonist will also get stimulated. Reciprocal innervation, all of us know, like contraction of muscle is accompanied by simultaneous inhibition of their agonist. If you are flexing your elbow, the biceps are contracting at the same time the triceps is releasing. This is what reciprocal innervation is, and this is why all the movements are taking place throughout the body. We are doing a movement, there is a two part of the movement. One is the agonists are contracting and the antagonists are relaxing. So every time this process is taking place, we know in our daily life, day to day, every movement, the reciprocal innervation will work over there. Reciprocal inhibition is necessary part of coordinated motion used for relaxation. Now come to the basic principles. As I told you, there are so many things apart from the patterns. So let's have a look on the basic principles. PNF is an integrated approach. You have to talk, if you are dealing with PNF, you have to bring all these these basic concepts together. It's not like each treatment is directed at total human being. Like you have to consider the human being as a total. You can't just approach the human being like for the upper limb, for the lower limb, because at the time you were thinking of some functional activity, you need the whole person at a time. It's not upper limb or lower limb which is going to take part in that functional activity. based on untapped existing potential of all patient therapists will always focus on the mobilizing patient reverse. What does it mean? We have to tap in patients' past experiences to have a brief idea regarding the movement organization of that patient inside his brain, like the organization of the brain, what kind of work the patient was involved into in his past prior to his injury. And accordingly, we have to select strategies, we have to select tasks for the patient post-injury in the post-injury status, so that the patient can recall all those things in a very easy way, instead of providing him some very new kind of task, which will lead him to think a lot, as you have seen in that motor learning program. The first phase, cognitive phase, it's a patient has to think a lot regarding all those activities. Nothing is coming out in that way. So according to me, if the patient is coming to you, whatever, it's a stroke patient having some insult to his brain, he is recovering. So you must look into his past, that what was the person in his individual level, like is he is working in some IT sector, or working in some hospital, working as a lawyer, or he's a pharma. This kind of sort of things you have to think, you have to keep in your mind. Unless and until you think all things, you'll not be able to know who was the person at his level. Okay, so therapist will always focus on mobilizing the patient reserves, and you have to work on what the patient has left with after the injury. What was left with the patient, you have to work with on. All of us know about the neuroplasticity and how we are working with that after brain injury. After brain injury, whatever brain substrate was left inside the brain, that is going to take the responsibility of those neurons which are already dead. They are compensating for all those things. So we have to go with the patient reserve. Whatever the patient is left with after the injury, we have to work with that. The treatment approach is always positive and reinforcing. Every concept has different thought process. So here PNF is a completely positive approach. You have to think positive. You have to start with the positive part, strong part, and later on you will go the weaker part. As I told you, like we have to start with the strong part, and with help of the strong part, we have to treat the weakest part. With the help of this strong part, we have to try to bring some facilitation in the weaker parts. Later on, we'll show some images which will clear our ideas. Okay, and using that which the patient can do on the, definitely you can't just force the patient to do something what is he can't achieve at that stage, particular stage. You have to start with very basic kind of things. Again, I am telling, if you are look back into your stage, like when you were infant, how you grew up, like the basic things come first, then the advanced thing. You can't imagine the patient has been lying on the bed and you came today, you came to treat the patient and you ask the patient stand up and let's walk, climb the stairs. Rather, you'll start from the basic kind of things like transition in the bed from supine to side lying, then sitting, all those quadruped position, walking on the mats, then to stand to walk, pre-gait trainings and all. After that later on will keep on improving the exercise protocols, bringing more complex things into the picture. So it's not like that you are putting all the loads on the patient which is not able to do at that stage. That is going to worsen the situation even more. The patient will become demotivated, patient participation will be less. And another thing, if we are following this positive approach, as the treatment approach is always positive in PNF, so you have to gain patient confidence in that thing. If you are starting the strongest, the patient will also have some motivation regarding that. You will see things getting improved. So it's very important. Sorry. So the primary goal of all patients is to help patient achieve their highest level of function. With all the concept, with all the approaches, as I told you, our main goal is to achieve the highest level of function. Whatever we work for, our goal is to achieve the highest level of function, so that we can get back our patient into their daily lives, activity of daily lives. At least they can take care of their activities of daily lives. Next is to reach this highest level of function, therapist integrates principles of motor control and motor learning. As we have seen, principles of motor control, we have to focus on that stability part before you are going to mobility. You have to become sure that patient has gained enough stability to perform all this transition movements and other kind of mobility stuff. And motor learning, you have to go through repeated session of all these functional activities. If you want to teach the patient any functional task, you have to keep on repeating things on different contexts, on different environments, on different setups. This is how we have learned. We are now we are adults, that but the time we are infants, this is how we have learned. We fall thousand times. After that, we have achieved the state that we are able to walk without any support. The next is, this include treatment on level of body structure, activity level, as well as level of participation. So, you know, ICF, all these international classification of functioning, they include this activity level. On the personal, we are talking about participation level, where the patient is taking participation in any live situations. Is attending some party, going to some outdoor games. These kind of stuffs are come into that participation limitation. So you have to assess all these things. What is the activity limitations of the patient? What are the participation limitations of the patient? And what factors are restricting him to participate in all these factors? Then you will find out the impairments which are causing this activity and participation limitations. As I told you, Seddington in 1947, concept of facilitation and inhibition, stretch reflex, neurophysiological phenomena, that is reciprocal innervation. We have spoken regarding this. And next, in autogenic inhibition, we'll look into it. So PNF pattern exercises enhance the specificity of training, the flow of kinetic energy traveling through the body in spiral and diagonal lines of action. So why they have chosen the diagonal patterns, all these movements? Because if you think of functional movement doesn't take place in a single plane. Like if you're flexing your hand, doing flexion and abduction, all these movements are taking into single plane. If you're doing flexion, it's a sagittal plane. This abduction, that is front. But what we learn in PNF is you are coming out of the planes, you are doing some three-dimensional movement patterns. You are doing flexion, abduction, even rotation along with that rotation part. So if you can look into all the functional movement throughout the day, whatever you are doing, you can see all these things are going in diagonal patterns. You are reaching for some object, you are going down to pick up some object. All these things are going diagonal, and rotation, all these components are there. So this is and the next thing is the brain knows nothing about muscle, but only about movement. This lecture has been presented by Charles Edward Beaver, Dr. Charles Edward Beaver, an English neurologist, in a Croonian lecture on muscular movement and their representation in the central nervous system, delivered before the Royal College of Physicians of London, June 1903. So what are the Croonian lectures? They are very much prestigious lecture, happened in the Royal College of Physicians. Over there, he has made the statement and given enough evidence behind this also. The brain knows nothing about muscle, only about movement. What does it suggest? Brain only register the movements performed by the group of muscles or individual muscle, but it won't register the muscle which is performing all the movements. But as you know, everything needs evidence. So he has shown that stimulating certain part of the cortex, motor cortex, is bringing movement in the limbs. So this is how he has made this statement: the brain knows nothing about muscles, but only about movement. What kind of movement? It should be purposeful movement. Brain doesn't, like, we have even heard that term, brain after any injury, brain can change, but if something matters to brain, then only brain is going to pay attention to that thing. You are doing simply flexion and extension exercise for days, long horizontal abduction, and think you are treating a patient who haven't experienced such kind of movements in his entire life. You are treating a farmer. You are treating a farmer, very poor patient. You are treating him, and you have started with bridging, pelvic rotation, all these stops, which he has never experienced. So just think what kind of impression he is going to have back inside the brain. So for him, it's a very new thing. And if you are again going to the motor learning phase, he'll back into that cognitive part. He has to again unlearn all those activities which are already installed in his brain in the motor cortex, and he has to relearn the new activities. So instead of giving something new, you should be always okay with what the patient was doing in his previous life, the kind of movement organization, the kind of movement patterns. So what I want to say, you have to look into their past to have a brief idea of his neural circuitry. Like every individual is unique. You can't treat all the individuals in the same way. You have to change your process. If you have to change your set your goals differently. Their demand is different. Their goal is different, as they are very much unique in their individual level. So even today we wake up in the morning with different organization of the brain, and by the time we are going to sleep, the whole organization will change again. Tomorrow morning will come with a new organization of the brain. This is how things are changing. It's not like neuroplasticity is only happens to the normal individual. It's a basis of learning for even a healthy brain also. Okay, so neuroplasticity takes place in a healthy brain as well as a injured brain, so it doesn't matter. So you have to think in that way. If you are focusing on individual muscles for flexion, extension, yes, those are also important, but you have to think what for. If you are doing some strengthening exercise, resisted training, that will improve the strength, that will improve the flexibility. If you are doing stretching exercise, and it will improve the mobility. If you are doing mobilization, it will improve the joint range of motion, flexibility and all. But does it going to improve the functional ability of the patient? Just think of it, whether it's going to improve the functional skills with these unidirectional movements. So it's very difficult, you know. So that is the thing. So just to have a look, some diagonal motions in sports. As sports injuries, we are treating with PNF concept, a very worldwide, this famous treatment approach, I can say. On-field stretching, this autogenic inhibition, we'll discuss regarding this, whatever we are treating the hamstring stretching, and we are getting instant result over there, like restricted hamstring range, we are improving the range within 7 to 10 seconds, like how this is happening, all this stuff we do. So just have these diagonal patterns. None of the movements are in a single plane, you can see over there. Although we have learned all these passive movement, assisted movements, and they have their own importance, but you have to think whenever you're treating a patient, and when it comes to achieve the maximum functional goal, as we have learned the principle of PNF, we need to achieve the highest functional level. So with all these sort of things, you are not going to achieve the highest functional level. You have to think according to patient's whatever he was doing in the past, whatever his brain organization is, whatever shorter movement components he's going through, all these things. So you just have to tap into their past and just click over there, and you send the correct stimulus, you will able to rewire the brain over there. So what is facilitation? We talk of it making things easier. So let's have a look. An impulse causing the recruitment and discharge of additional motor neurons in the spinal cord. Result in increased excitability in the muscles. We want to increase the excitability in the muscles. If the muscle is lying flaccid, we have to facilitate, and we know all those steps of facilitating the low tone muscles, but we have a lot of tools. But the thing is, we have to select the tools very specifically according to patient's goals, according to patient demands. We have to think on the patient level. That is the basic thing. So what is inhibition? Just the opposite of the facilitation, whatever we are talking about. Any stimulus that causes motor neuron to drop away from the discharge zone and away from the spinal cord. Inhibition result in decreased excitability of motor neurons. Muscle spasticity can be decreased. This is a very important factor we have to keep on mind whenever we are treating upper motor neuron lesion patient. They came with, nowadays, most of the time we are getting patient with chronic illness, like patient have a stroke 6 months or 1 year before, and after they are coming with all those abnormal patterns, dominating synergist patterns. So it's very difficult to normalize the tone, like whatever we learn in NDT Bovat, normalization of tone. In PNF also we are going to have those things, how to normalize the tone. So this is very important. So what is stretch reflex? The very important part of PNF concepts. So have a look. The stretch reflex involves two types of receptors: the muscle receptors, which are present in the intrafusal muscle fibers, and Golgi tendon organs present between the muscles and the tendon, which sends any during contraction, the Golgi tendon organ get activated, and it just there is a reflex inhibition in that part, which leads to like we are talking about hamstring stretching, the restricted stretching, restricted hamstring range. On field, the patient is having a little bit of issues with hamstring restriction and all. So we go with strong contraction of that hamstring. We have activated the Golgi tendon organ, and it caused the reflexive inhibition. Immediately again we stretch, we got a new range. This is how things are working. So again, reciprocal inhibition, let's see, these are the very important concept, and better like it's coming again and again, we are dealing with all these things. The second mechanism which deals with relationship agonist and antagonist. Movement, any movement is happening, there is an agonist and antagonist. That's why movements are getting coordinated. If these things are not working properly, you will have a problem like spasticity. What happens in spasticity? One is over recruiting, but another is not acting properly. Continuously recruiting, but there is no inhibition. So that leads to only spasticity. After that is autogenic inhibition. We have just now we talk about that stretching part. This is what that phenomenon called, that autogenic inhibition. Relaxation in the same muscle that is experiencing tension. You are creating so much of tension in the hamstring muscle, and the very next moment you are giving again a stretch, you will have a lot of relaxation. What's happening? You are stretching you are contracting the hamstring, very much tension in the hamstring. So you ultimately you activated the Golgi tendon, and it's giving some reflex inhibition to that muscle, and immediately we are going to again a new range. So tension built up during active contraction stimulates the GTO, causing a reflexive relaxation of the muscle during the subsequent passive stretch. I guess this is all clear. So this is the picture we are talking about, this reciprocal inhibition. Just have a look on this. All of you know that patellar jerk, we are assessing patients to see how the tone is. So what happens over there? You are tapping the patella, quadriceps getting contracted. So what happened, you can see, you tap this patellar tendon. This is a sensory neuron, the afferent fiber. This is going towards the dorsal horn, the dorsal root ganglion. It's getting synapse with, one is getting synapse with the excitatory, and another is getting synapse with the inhibitory. This is the interneuron in between. So the excitatory one is causing the quadriceps to contract immediately, whereas the inhibitory is relaxing the hamstring. This is how, or else if the hamstring getting tight, the leg will not, whatever the response is there after tapping the knee, you achieve the hyperextension of the knee immediately. What is the reflex? So if the hamstring got tight, you won't achieve this part. So this is how things are happening. So now what are the uses of PNF? PNF treatment has been used to increase strength, flexibility, coordination, and functional mobility. So apart from all these things, I must focus on this functional mobility. This functional treatment approach is nowadays very much famous. Instead of going with this conventional and traditional exercises, people are going for task-oriented things. So because they somehow they understood that the most important thing is to bring back our patient to their functional life, and that is not going to happen with only passive movement and assisted, active, resisted exercise, all these sort of things. Unless and until the patient practice the functional activities which he was involved into, he won't get that kind of outcome. The main goal of treatment is to facilitate the patient in achieving a movement or posture. Stretches, well as diagonals and rational exercises patterns are used to improve ADLs, functional mobility, and athletic performances. So another point, mainly used in orthopedic rehabilitation for musculoskeletal injuries and neurological rehabilitation. Mainly we use in these conditions very much, well, although as I told you, nowadays we are using this thing in cardiopulmonary rehabilitation also and other stuff. Like PNF can be used for any condition, however the patient condition level may require modification. We always do modification. In the next slides, we will show you like the how much kind of variations we are bringing into this diagonal patterns. We know already previously we focus on these diagonal patterns, only doing diagonal pattern, but as I told you, you have to do a little bit of variation with these diagonal patterns. Just imagine with these diagonal patterns, how much of functional activities are coming into these diagonal patterns. only these diagonal patterns is not going to fulfill the patient functional demand. So you have to think a little bit different. You follow the diagonal patterns, but in accordance with these functional activities. Now, as I told you, principles and procedures, we're done with the principle, pretty clear, I guess. Now it's time to discuss the procedures. So the very first procedure is resistance. So why we are using resistance in PNF? So what is resistance? Like opposing force to patient movement is called resistance. Any opposing force, patient is doing a movement, patient is doing a pattern of D1 pattern, flexion, adduction, and external rotation. You are giving resistance to that thing. What changes within? So you can see that. So opposing force to the patient movement is called resistance. The amount of resistance provided during an activity must be correct for the patient's condition and the goal of activity. This is what we call optimum resistance. The resistance should not be too much high that the patient won't start the movement, and should not be too low that patient is not feeling any resistance during the movement. So what is the benefit of optimal resistance? Facilitate the ability of a muscle to contract, and they increase the cortical representation. There are numerous number of researches which shows that resisted exercise has a very good impression in the cortical representation, motor cortex. You can go through this, you will get a lot of idea regarding this. Next is increase motor control. If you want to increase the motor control, once the patient is done with all these active, assisted, and passive, we have to start giving resistance a bit. We have to start all these things in a little bit complex way. Help the patient gain an awareness of the motion and its direction. By giving resistance, we also guiding the direction of the movement. From the direction in which you are giving the resistance, patient can understand that which way I have to go. So this is the benefit of giving optimum resistance, and all of us know that resistance help us to increase the strength. So now we have deal with resistance. So let's have the type of muscle contraction, the very basic things all of you know. Will not give that much of time to this. We have very less time left. So the first one is isometric, static. The intent of both the therapist and the patient is that no motion occurs. We know, all of us know, the patient dealing with patient with pain, what we suggest, like very acute phase of injury, when the patient is recovering, we suggest isometric movement. There should not be any movement, any change in the length of the muscle. This is our goal. The intent of both the therapist and the patient is that no motion occurs. So if you are talking about the techniques of PNF, rhythmic stabilization, those kind of things, we are using isometric muscle contraction over there. We don't want any movement. So the basic funda behind this is we want stability. Stability, whenever we are talking about stability part, we have to think of isometric contraction. Concentric, shortening, the agonist produces motion. The agonist muscles, you are flexing the elbow, the biceps are contracting. This is what we call concentric. And the eccentric muscle contraction and outside force, gravity or resistance produce motion. You are standing and you are sitting. So the glutes, the extensors, the quadriceps, all these muscles are giving away. They are allowing you to sit. Those patients who are having a poor motor control of this eccentric group of muscles, they won't be able to sit. They will sit in a very bizarre manner where you have to give a little bit of handling. You have to facilitate things. You have to think in a feed forward way, like what should I do? That patient will be coming down in a normal manner. So for that, you have to know these normal movement sequences. If you don't know the normal movement sequences, there is not meaning that you are going to find out what kind of abnormal movement is going on over there. If you have to identify some kind of abnormal thing, you have to be very aware regarding the normal thing. Okay. So the next one is isotonic. There is dynamic. The intent of patient is to produce motion. Here we are allowing the patient to produce motion. We can resist in these movements. Isotonic, we provide resistance, optimum resistance while doing all this kind of movement where the patient has to move the limb, flexion, extension, and rotation, all this sort of kind of. So we have talk about irradiation. You are seeing this picture. We have did, I guess, like everyone has went through the situation when we want to squeeze the even last drop of water from a cloth after washing the clothes. So what do you think, the hands only providing that much of strength when you are doing this particular activity, or the full body the reinforcement is coming from throughout the body, each and every corner of the body, and it supplies the strength to your hands to complete this activity. This is what we call irradiation. You can have a lot of other examples from your daily life only when these principles are coming into act. It's not the hand which is helping you to, with our hands, initially we can squeeze the cloth, but after that, if you want a little bit more strength from coming out from all over the body, you have heard of sending reinforcement. So that kind of reinforcement is coming from each and every bit corner of the body. You are, what you are supposed to do in that situation, we are flexing our trunk, our facial expression changes, our twist and turns all over the bodies, and we are performing that activity and squeezing and every bit of water from it. So this is what irradiation and reinforcement in a very simple way. So spread and response to stimulation. Reinforcement means to strengthen by press addition. As I told you, make stronger. So what are the effects? Maximal resistance may be used to cause irradiation and overflow from stronger parts to the weaker parts. As I told you, you have to start your session with the positive part, and with the help of the good part, we are treating the weaker parts. If you are sitting, if you all are hearing this talk, and if you are on bed or sitting or somewhere, if you can just sit on your bedside by bringing your legs down and just in a leg dangling position. Now resist your knee joint, like keep your hand just above the knee and resist the hip flexion range. Just you can try this one, like you sitting on the bedside, you are placing your foot down the floor, just resist the hip flexion, keeping your hand just above the knee. You just see the response. Okay, just see the response. There will be facilitation of the dorsiflexors, the tibialis anterior automatically. So this is what like irradiation reinforcement. If you also can see this, if I can show you, you just keep your hands like this, and if you give a resistance in the proximal part, and if you want to just you try to flex your elbow, this will only bring in facilitation to the distal part. So just imagine a case of any peripheral injuries where there is a wrist drop and injury after also brain damage, also stroke. These parts are, the patient is having good control in the proximal part, and there is no muscle contraction or less muscle contraction in the distal part. So you can start facilitating this kind of movements at the very early stage. So we have discussed this. And next, the very important thing, manual contact. Very important topic in PNF. If you are dealing with PNF, you need to have a basic idea, clear idea regarding this manual contact. What are the effects? What is for manual? What are the uses of manual contacts in this PNF concept? So what are the effects? Stimulate the muscle. You are touching the skin. Your hands will be over the skin, over the muscle, over the joints. You are activating the receptors. These receptors are sending message to the spinal cord, from spinal cord to brain, and this process is going on. So effects: stimulate the muscle, stimulate the synergistic muscle to reinforce the movement. With the handling part only, you just tell the patient what you want him to do. With this handling part, you bring on the resistance, what I have discussed earlier. You guide the patient regarding the direction, which direction you want the patient to move his limbs. Okay, promotes trunk stabilization and indirectly helps the limb motion. So whatever we're talking, like with the help of the positive strong part, we are treating the weak part. So in another way, you are treating indirectly. You are not going directly to the weak part, but you are treating indirectly. The weaker part is treated indirectly. But although your goal is to treat that part only, but you are not taking your handling to the distal hand. As I show you in the example, you are not placing your manual contact over the distal part. You are treating your handling in the proximal part, and this is bringing some kind of facilitation in the distal part. So prevents confusion. So touch or manual contact contributes to facilitation by stimulating the exteroceptors, and it should be purposeful, directional, comfortable. As I told you, you need not to pinch very hard. You just use your finger pads, thumb pads, this web of the thumb over here. You need not to just pinch every time the patient get hurt and is not going to cooperate with you. The participation level will be very less. So you have to be very careful while you are handling. Your handling matters. It definitely matters when you are using all these approaches like NDT, like PNF, like motor learning, the thing which matters most is your handling. So the kind of grip you are using in the PNF is lumbrical grip. What are the uses of this? What are the benefits of this grip? Grip for facilitation, you are giving facilitation. Therapists get tactile information about skin temperature, soft tissue quality, quality and intensity of muscle contraction. Therapists can give optimal resistance with this kind of handling. We are performing three-dimensional movement, and this is the best grip for all those things. You can give resistance from all the direction. That's why PNF, whoever has founded PNF, the founders of PNF had preferred lumbrical grip for this PNF. And you have to get master with this grip, the manual contact part. So this is the basic part. If you're not very much good with this manual touch and manual contact touch and this gripping part, you won't get that much of a satisfactory result with the patients. So what is next? Stretch. So the stretch stimulus occurs when the muscle is elongated. Why we use stretch? Just in the picture in the background, you can see Usain Bolt prior to just this competition in the sprinting and this 100 meter and 400 meter, all these things. They sit in the position where the dorsiflexor are stretched to its maximum. For what? The reason is to get a good start. The reason is to get a good start. Same approach we are using to our patients. We are giving stretch and you are going to the movement. You are giving a quick stretch and start the movement. So just getting the movement bang on start, you can say, like, that's why this stretch is very much important, and it has to be maintained throughout the movement. The lengthenation of the muscle is the starting position. Very, very important point. If you are talking about the patterns, D1 pattern, flexion, adduction. So what is the starting point? Starting point will be the lengthening position of the muscle is the starting position of each pattern. So you are starting with the D1 pattern. So you have to bring the upper limb into a stretching position from where you are going to start. So you are stretching the flexors and you are going to this part. So once you have completed the D1, so now the flexors are in contracted position, but the extensors are in a lengthened position. Again, this phenomena of reciprocal innervation. So you have done with the D1 flexion. So now it's time to D1 extension. So from where you are starting from a lengthened, the extensors are well lengthened in the stretching part. Then you are going for a D1 extension. Same thing is happening. And this name D1 extension, D1 flexion, the name is given upon this ending position of the pattern. It's not, we are starting from extension to flexion, but the name is D1 flexion. So name is given according to the ending position of the pattern. You are ending this position, you are in a flexion adduction pattern. So this is D1 flexion adduction pattern. So the name is given on the ending position of the pattern. I guess this is clear. So you have give a good start to the movement. You will going to achieve your goal. You are going to succeed in your goal. You will get a very much satisfactory result. So what are the effects? So let's have a look on the effects. Stimulate the activity of the muscle spindle. As I told you, you stretch it, you have activated the muscle spindle. Any contraction of the muscle on stretch will result in movement, and the brain knows not of muscle but of movement. As I told you regarding this phrase in very details, brain focuses on the movement part, not in individual muscles. You have to take these things in very much consideration whenever you are treating your patients. So what is traction? Traction is elongation of trunk or extremity. You are pulling apart joints, you are pulling apart, and again you are activating the receptors in the joints. You are sending signals to the brain that something is there. That's pulling apart. If you are with your eyes closed also, if someone is moving your joints, you are giving, you can easily, very much easily, you can tell where the movement is going on. This is the proprioceptors which are coming into play and telling you, giving you information all the time throughout the day, every moment. So this is the importance of proprioception. Proprioceptors, this whole concept is depend upon the proprioceptors only. So you have to give utmost importance to the proprioception part. Traction force is applied gradually. Why we are using traction the same way you are using the stretch to get a good start? You are using the traction, you are activating the system and just going. You are facilitating things and you ask the patient to go. Traction force is applied gradually. You need not to pull so hard. Just a little bit of traction coming into the movement, just finish it. Maintain throughout the movement and combined with appropriate resistance. So what are the effects? Joint separation stimulates joint receptors. Muscle stretch stimulates muscle spindle stretch receptors. Facilitate alpha motor neuron. This is the excited neuron, all of us know, and facilitate strength. So it's very important, all those things. Next is approximation. You have heard of traction. Now approximation is pushing kind of thing. You are compressing the joints. So this is what approximation is, and we used all these approximation procedures to have a good stability wherever it needs. Like in the picture, you can see my right hand is over the pelvis. I want stability in that side. In this picture, he was a model in one of my workshop. You can see the hand is placed in a closed chain, and we are working on this pre-gate activity. So he has, just imagine, he has a weak abductor and extensor, so he will definitely have a poor stability over the hip joint. So you need to give some facilitation to bring on this approximation effect, that stability part. Once you gain the stability, you ask the patient to step forward, the another leg will come into contact. So approximation is the compression of trunk or extremity. Compression through a joint stimulate joint receptors. You are again stimulating the joint receptors. Whether it's a stretch, you are contracting, you are giving a stretch, you are activating the muscle spindle, you are contracting, you are activating the Golgi tendon, you are giving traction, you are giving approximation, you are activating the receptors inside the joints and facilitate alpha motor neurons. And they are going to carry the information to the spinal cord and from the spinal cord to the brain. So what are the uses? Promote stabilization. As I told you, it promotes stabilization, facilitate weight bearing and control. Whenever it comes to weight bearing, we, in the very initial phases when the patient is recovering, we need to give some facilitation to wherever the patient needs support. We have to give support to the patient, and it will help to bear the weight on that leg. It's your facilitation, it's your handling which is stabilizing the pelvic part, because you are compensating just opposite to his muscles, like extensors and abductors are weak over there. So you are doing the work for those muscles in that position. This is it. Facilitate upright reaction. Always treat your patients in the upright posture. Try to treat as soon as you get your patients in the sitting position, just try to treat your patients in the upright position. It will have a very good impact on the central nervous system. Resist some component of motion. Example, use approximation and the end of the shoulder flexion to resist or elevation. So next is verbal stimulation, verbal commands. That is also very important. So how we are going to communicate with the patient? How we are going to communicate with the patient? You can call the patient's name. You can command the patient, I want you to do this. I want you to do this. Don't do this. Let me do this. Like this kind of commands you are continuously giving. The volume with which the command is given affects the strength of resulting muscle contraction. You are giving a very, your voice is very, very low and you are spreading a command. I want to do this. Just response of action. And again, you are telling that I want you to do this. So definitely there will be a lot of difference. So verbal command is very much important in PNF. You must have heard like nowadays videos in YouTube and other PNF workshop shouting like, pull me up, let me win, push, pull, this kind of hold, just hold it, let me win, let me pull over there. Again, this sort of commands you have to give very simple commands, but it should be in a proper way. Louder commands when strong muscle contraction is required. You want a strong muscle contraction, your voice should be louder than the previous one. You want less contraction of the, so accordingly you have to change your verbal commands. Softer and calmer tone when goal is relaxation and relief of pain. We are very much familiar with all those things, but until and unless you practice this principle, these procedures will not be able to master in this approach. So the command is divided into three parts. Preparation readies the patient for action. You are ready. Should we start this kind of action? Action tells the patient to start the action. Now pull your leg up and in. Go up and in. Now let in. Go out, and it tells the patient to start the action. Now pull your leg up and in. This sort of commands you have to give to the patient very clear. There should not be any confusion, like we have spoken in kind of when we talk about this manual contact and touch and handling part. There should not be any confusion. Just like that, your verbal command should be very much clear. It should not confuse the patients at any part of the treatment. Okay. The next point is correction. Tells the patient how to correct, modify the action. So again, if you think the patient is in which part of the motor learning program, if the patient needs some continuous verbal commands to correct all the postures, so he's not in an advanced stage still now, he's learning and he's doing mistakes. So let him do the errors and you have to correct all those mistakes for him. So what sort of command we are using? Hold, take, pull, push, relax, let me win, and you have seen like pull your leg up and down and out. This sort of commands you have to give when you are treating the patient with this patterns, all these patterns. What you want to do with the patients, you have to give a very clear command regarding this. So you just can see you can't shout like this. As I told you, if you want a strong contraction of the muscles, you need to give a bold command, but this should not be like this. The patient is getting scared and patient is not going to come to you for the very next session. And it shouldn't be very low. Like I told you, if you are giving too low, the patient is not able to hear the command. He's taking very casually your command, what he's telling to me. Like he will not show any interest regarding your command. So you have to be very specific. It should not be too much louder. It should not be too much like whispering something. Equally important, visual stimulation. You have to command your patient look up to your hand. Whenever he is moving into the patterns, he has to look over there. So accordingly, you are not only moving the hand, but his neck is also moving towards the pattern. As I told you, it's not an individual kind of movement. You have to involve the whole body. It helps a lot. It will improve the orientation of the patient. So it's very important. Your verbal commands, all these principles, all these procedures, you have to very master, very specific regarding all those things whenever you are.
Sovik, are you there? Sovik, are you there?
I think he lost his internet connection. Yeah,
Okay,
he'll
okay.
come back.
Participant, please wait. Sovik is connecting.
macular. दारा एक second. 1 second, 1 second.
Yes, Sobik, you can start.
Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the technical glitches, like I lost my connection, it seems. So we are talking about this timing. So timing is all about sequence of motions, like the motions coming from distal to proximal. Whenever we are treating the patient with this PNF approach, just go from distal to proximal. And timing for emphasis. So what is this timing for emphasis? You need a little bit of more improvement in the distal part. Like you can see in this picture, I'm just focusing on the dorsiflexion rather the full range of motion with that pattern. Just imagine of a flexion adduction pattern, but there's a good strength in that proximal part, but there is a less strength in that distal part, that is the dorsiflexion, the starting part. So in this time of emphasis, timing for emphasis, you have to focus on this initial part only. You keep on playing with that part. Once you achieve the good strength, you can go for the rest of the pattern. So another very important thing is body mechanics and body position. The therapist's body should be in line of motion. Shoulder and pelvis face the direction of the motion. Therapist stand in walk standing position. The resistance comes from the therapist's body while the hands and arms are comparatively relaxed. This will help to just bring down the energy expenditure. Being a therapist, we need to make ourselves in a safer position, like, or else we will become very much fatigued at a very less amount of time. So just look into this slide, this phrase, grow through what you go through. You grow through what you go through. Now, as I told you, we grew up at this stage. all of us know all the magics happen on the floor, and we are talking about mat exercise, a lot of mat exercise. So what is this mat exercise? It came from here only. If you can look back and have a you have also seen that children's growing in front of you only. So what are the things they, how they achieve the stability part, and after that the mobility part. So these are the things. They build balance, visual tracking, build arm and wrist strength, core strength, help discover how gravity feels, builds flexor muscles, strengthen the spine, builds neck and back muscles. So now coming into the PNF patterns at last. So each pattern has 3 dimensions: flexion or extension, we told earlier only, abduction, adduction, and rotation. This makes a 3-dimensional movement. Another reason they have thought of this diagonal and spiral pattern, if you can have a look in the arrangement of the muscles inside our body, they are also in a same the same arrangement only, same fashion only. The attachments of, you can see the sartorius, tibialis anterior, biceps brachii, levator scapulae, all are in a diagonal pattern, spiral pattern, none of them a straight pattern. So these are the basic concept behind this approach, and this is also we neglect most of the time. We are only talking about the upper limb and lower limb patterns, forgetting, leaving behind the scapular patterns and the pelvic patterns, which are having the most importance in this PNF concept. Wherever you are treating the, you want to treat the trunk, that is the most important of the body. Without the balance and stability in the trunk, you can't use your hands and legs. They're of no use. If you are having no trunk balance, no trunk stability, what is for your hands and legs? You can't do anything without that. So it's very important in the very initial phase, you have to start doing work with all these scapular patterns, anterior elevation, posterior depression, posterior elevation, anterior depression, and coming down to the pelvis, anterior elevation, posterior depression, posterior elevation, and anterior depression. All these patterns are having direct link with the limb patterns also. So according to, you have to merge all these things, and you are doing some pattern, but you want that improvement to happen in some other parts of the body, as I told you, with the principles of irradiation and reinforcement. So you can see, as I told you, this what she is doing. The first one is neutral part. The second one, the middle one, is the anterior depression. The scapula is going into depression, anterior depression. The third one is the posterior elevation. This is how they look, and these are the muscles. So we are skipping this part as we are not into the pattern today. Next one, the second one is anterior elevation. This is how it looks, and posterior depression, third one. These are the muscles. If you come into the pelvis, the first one is the neutral one, second one anterior depression, posterior elevation. Again, you see the second one is the anterior elevation and posterior depression. Whenever you are moving all these patterns, anterior depression and posterior elevation, posterior depression, anterior elevation, you have to keep on mind what kind of changes you are bringing in the trunk. So in case of even low back pain, chronic pain, we are using all these patterns to bring a lot of mobility and strength in the trunk and the core part of the body. Same part you are treating with the pelvic region, you are bringing more of stability, more of strength in the lower trunk. When you are working with the scapular range of motion, you are working with the upper trunk. Now you just, this is what he is performing. So this is the starting position. You can see I just picked up some pictures. Like, we can't have live demonstration, neither we have models in such a difficult situation nowadays. Still we are trying to perform all these things. I will try to make you understand. So what he is performing, so let us start with the very basic one. He's changing his handling. As I told you, you have to keep on changing your handling. So this is what he is doing. He is resisting the motion of, over here you can see this one, just we have seen the pelvic anterior elevation, and over here scapular anterior depression. So this is the starting part. He have stretched the part, and now what he is doing is asking the patient to just pull inside. Okay, so just look into the pattern. This is the starting part and this is the ending part, and just look at the body position and body mechanics of the therapist, which is also important. So what we are facilitating over here, in this pattern only, we are facilitating the gross trunk flexion, mass trunk flexion. Okay, so we are not only doing the scapular and pelvic pattern, but we are also facilitating the trunk flexion. So in patient who is having less motor control, just in acute, very acute stage, like he's lying on the bed, so you can facilitate from lying to side lying and side lying to prone in all these activities. You can ask the patient to just pull me up, go front, like this kind of commands. You can see over here, patient is lying on a side lying position. The you can see the therapist position, hip is flexion, and his shoulders, his hip are in position in the direction of the movement. And as he's going to the ending position, his position is also changing, and patient is going into more flexion. And from here, you can facilitate also prone. Like this is side lying. After that, you can go to prone position. So now this is the basic handling for this pelvic anterior elevation and scapular anterior depression. Now we are going back. So he has just changed his handling. You can see this hand is staying back in that position from the previous one, but he has changed his handling over here. He is now, his manual contact and touch is on the elbow, but he's into the same pattern, only the handling has changed. He's using a long lever instead of the short lever. Purpose is same, handling is changing. And again, if you can see, same pattern, but handling has changed. My goal is to bring on the same functional movement, but the handling is changed. Now this hand is also in a different position. His hand is just above the knee, just distal part of the femur, and this hand he is holding in this elbow region. So he has fully stretched the patient. He is bringing the good stretch over there, good elongation in the trunk. Now he can start this pattern. So you can do all these sort of things. In this movement pattern only, you just start with rhythmic initiation, then you progress into combination of isotonics, then dynamic reversals. All these sort of things you can use all this in a single this position. Again, we come to this lower limb pattern. So as I told you, you have to start with the, if you are starting any pattern, it should be in a stretch position. So what is the stretch position over here? You can see the hip extensors are in a stretching position. So he is working on the extension pattern. So it's on a stretching position, elongated position. Now he will go into the pattern. So this is the starting position, this is the ending position. But most of the time we do all these things in a supine lying. So here he is doing in a side lying position. You have to keep on changing the position. You have to keep on challenging the position. You have to make the things more complex. And here, that was the extension. Now this is the flexion pattern, flexion, adduction. He's holding the leg in this situation. Now the flexors are in elongated position. He's in a stretch position. So he's ready to start the pattern. One hand, with his left hand, he's holding over here, giving support to the leg. With the other hand, he is just placing his hand over the dorsum of the foot in a stretch position. You give a stretch and you ask the patient to pull me up. So just this is the pattern. This is the starting pattern. This is the ending pattern. So as I told you, the name will be depend upon the ending of the pattern. So he is going into flexion adduction pattern, starting with this stretch position of the flexors, now going to the end position. What he is doing now, once you feel that the muscles are getting activated, like here, if you give resistance with this left hand, whatever, if you give resistance with this left hand, if you think the hip flexors are well activated, you can remove this hand and you can see the effect. What he is doing over here, he has, once the patient hip flexors are activated, he has placed both the hands over here to bring more resistance, as I told you. Now you can see his whole, this distal part is automatically activated. This is what we call irradiation and reinforcement. If you give more resistance from here, from the distal part, giving more resistance, you will get more radiation and more reinforcement. You can see how much good dorsiflexion is activated over here. So if the patient dorsiflexors are weak in this situation, you can use the strongest part of the pattern to treat the weaker part. Same here. This is the starting position. Always the stretch position, stretched elongated position will be the starting position. By looking the pattern only, you can have a good idea. Over here also what he is doing, pelvic, his hand is in, he is resisting the pelvic anterior elevation, and here in the shoulder he is doing this posterior depression kind of thing. So just look the pattern, how she is coming short from here. If you can see how much elongated her trunk in this situation, in this sideline, and now she is too much short. So it's a nice technique of teaching the patient good control of that muscles of this, all those body movement, that functional movement parts. You are not only treating this scapular and pelvic pattern, just it's not only just for the pelvis and the scapula, but you are working on the trunk as well. You are having a weak trunk flexors, you start with these patterns in the very early phase on the bed while the patient is not able to stand, not able to sit. You just go with all these patterns. The patient will have a better coordination, better stability, and later on he will achieve a better mobility also. So you can see the bilateral, we are using the bilateral limb patterns, and the patient will have facilitation in the lower trunk area. Trunk pattern, what the patient is, what the he's the model over there, what he is doing, this is extending the neck, extension, right lateral flexion and rotation. This is the neck pattern, combined pattern. So he is doing, and we are giving a little bit of resistance from this hand and over there also. So you have to very specific on your handling part. You can see the manual contact very less, but enough to give the patient stimulus and guide the patient to the exact direction. So we are doing the, over in this picture, we are performing this bilateral symmetrical upper limb movement. So this, you can just see the body mechanics of the therapist and handling a good grip. Next, now if you can just imagine, if I give too much of resistance over here in this pattern, what kind of facilitation you are going to have? Definitely we'll have a better facilitation in the lower trunk, even in the lower limb. The more I will resist this pattern, the more radiation, more irradiation, more reinforcement is coming to the lower limbs. So the same kind of approach you can use in case of paraplegics who are paralyzed down the umbilicus. They are having a poor sitting balance. So you keep on doing these patterns, strong patterns in the supine lying, and you test, do all this clinimetry, the measurement prior to your treatment and after the treatment. You will see definitely a changes in the sitting balance and reaching forward, all this kind of thing. So as I told you, we can perform all these patterns in all the developmental positions. I have, you can see, I'm just this involved this upper limb. We have kept this upper limb in the quite well closed chain, a good approximation over the elbow, over the shoulder. You can see my leg in between over here, which is supporting a bit. We don't want the whole weight of this body to be just going down the shoulder. That will cause definitely harm to the patient. The patient will start complaining of shoulder pain, all this impingement syndrome, and will become swollen. The patient is not going to come from the very next session. So my main aim is to treat this weaker part, but what I'm doing, I'm facilitating, I'm just doing the pattern from over here, this scapular, this anterior elevation, what we have just seen. I'm going for anterior elevation of the scapula. Even in this position, I can ask the patient to reach for some object with this hand, and at the same time, I will resist this pattern from here. So definitely you can imagine what kind of irradiation this is going to have on this weaker part, this side. Definitely there will be facilitation on this limb, the trunk, the lower limb, everything. So this is also a modified trunk pattern. You have started from this and going down. So I guess time is up, and we are ending over here only. Osikda, are you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Ovik.
Yeah, we are just ending the slides over here. We are, I just guess that we are.
How many slides remaining?
It's over almost, like whatever I have to deliver in context of principles and procedures, I have delivered all those things. Now we can have some other sessions on the pattern. So there are slides, like there are many slides if you want to discuss the patterns also. So let's keep them for next session. So this is what all regarding the PNF principles and procedures. Keep on trying all these positions. Just keep on mind that you have to keep on bring lot of variations, lot of different positions. You have to try all the patterns in different developmental position, as I shown you in supine, in side lying, in quadruped, in the kneeling, even in sitting, all the things in all the mat, whatever we are doing in the mat exercise, you have to keep on bringing all the patterns in different position to bring out best possible results, whatever the need, according to the need and goal of the patient, whatever the job demands of the patient. You have to ask the patient what the patient need after this, whatever he has went through, the injury, the brain damage, or whatever impairment the patient is having, post injury status. You have to ask the patient what is his goal, because there should be a goal, and that should be time oriented, there should be very much specific. And I told you the importance of measurement, clinimetry, measuring the things prior to your treatment and after the treatment. And the task, whatever you are choosing, should be very much realistic, real life task, so that the patient participation will be maximum in this regards. The patient will get motivated all the time, or else if you keep on doing passive movement, assisted active movements, all these things, patient is going to get bored doing all these sort of things again and again. So you keep on doing just all these functional activities, task oriented, and use all these PNF principles and procedures in your therapy sessions. Thank you, Kaushik.
Thank you, Sovik.
I'm sorry
Some
for the
question.
technical glitch in between, like we had a problem with the network.
Okay, some question is in the chat box.
Yeah.
So we can take the question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Question from Dr. Osit Modak. PT willing to do extension but automatically flexion occurring. How can we explain physiologically?
Once again.
PT willing to do extension but automatically flexion occurring. How can we explain physiologically?
Okay, as I told you, the procedure and principles, you have to keep on correcting all these abnormal movements what are coming into the patterns. Like you are treating the patient for the very first time, you can't expect from the patient that he will perform the pattern in a very well manner. As I told you, these are very new things for the patient if you are doing only the patterns. But if you can modify the patterns into some functional movements, it will be very much easier. Like just bringing the hand towards the mouth, like what we do during eating. So this is also a pattern. You can modify the flexion adduction pattern into this thing with the elbow flex. So this kind of what we call replication. One technique in PNF when we train, where we train patients the functional movements, it's called replication. So if the patient is making mistakes, let him make the mistakes, let him do the error correction, as we have seen the stages of motor learning. Definitely patient that in the very initial phase, patient is in learning phase, he is going to do all the mistakes, and that phase is very much attention seeking. The patient is going to take a lot of time for learning those new things after a few days. But it is very important, you have to come away from all these strict laws of this D1, D1 flexion, D2 extension, all these kind of things. Just try to mix all those things with the functional task and task oriented thing. Then automatically the patient will get up. Thank you.
Next question. What is the difference between simple ROM exercise and PNF? And both
as I told you, simple range of motion exercise, we can't just throw it out. Like even from since our graduated days, undergraduate days, we are using range of motion exercise. As I told you, range of motion exercise, what range of motion, the name itself is telling that it is going to improve the range. It is going to improve the range. But if you want to teach one of your patient is he used to play a golf. Suppose he used to play a golf, or he is used to play cricket. So how you are giving some range of motion exercise, and if you want all these things to be relearned by the patient, so you can't compare all these functional task activities with the range of motion exercise. That's why you have to keep all those handling sort of things, proper handling, and you have to know the normal movement sequences, what needed in playing golf, playing cricket. Now apply all those things in your treatment protocols. That's it. But you can't expect doing range of motion exercise only give the functional independence of a patient.
Okay. Next question, sir. Please tell me about autogenic inhibition and reciprocal inhibition.
Autogenic inhibition, we all of us do, but we might don't know the name. Like if you are talking about PNF, every day I think who are in a clinical setup, they are doing this PNF stretching. to improve the range, to improve the flexibility of that muscle. Someone came with tight hamstring. What we do? We go into the restricted, up to the restricted range. We do SLR, ask the patient to do passive. We are doing passive SLR with handling. We are going to the restricted range and ask the patient to push down. So what we are asking the patient to contract the hamstring as much as possible. So what we are doing, what happening after contraction, that severe contraction of the hamstring is going to activate the Golgi tendon, and the response will be a reflex inhibition. The response will be a reflex inhibition, which will help to getting relaxation of the same muscle. And once we get the relaxation, again we are achieving some new range, going to the new range, again repeat this thing 3 to 4 times. We are holding the contraction for 6 to 7 seconds, again achieving a new range, again holding for contraction. In another way, we are fooling the brain. Like once the muscle is fully contracted, the muscle spindle asks for more muscle fibers, that I am getting short, give me some more muscle fiber. Once he's getting the more muscle fiber, we are getting the new range, again continuing the same process. And what reciprocal innervation is, we are doing movements. As I told you, for every movement, two muscle groups are working. Two muscle groups are working. The antagonist, which is contracting. In case of elbow flexion, the biceps are working as the agonist and the triceps are working as the antagonist. So one is contracting, one is relaxing. So this is how we are all the movements are getting coordinated. Without reciprocal innervation, we can't expect coordinated movement. And what happens in stroke patient, those are having hyperexcitivity. That is the thing, because the brain got damaged, is not able to send all the inhibitory responses from the central nervous system. So what we are left with, only the excitatory stimulus. That's why we are going into a state of contraction, severe spasm, but there is no one to send the inhibitory response. So the whole thing got imbalanced, and the patient landed into situations of, you might have seen the postures of a stroke patient. So these are the difference. Thank you. Kaushik, I can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Sorry. Does PNF outcome differ in SCI and stroke patient with spasticity?
Definitely.
And what is the different approach in both categories?
You have to, it's always different. The approach depends upon the patient's goal and demand. You can't just tell you that this will be the approach. So if the patient who is having a SCI, you have to ask the patient what is goals. As I told you, everything is goal oriented now, task oriented. A patient with SCI and a patient with stroke, the severity of the injuries, how much amount of brain substrate the patient is left with after having a stroke, whether his brain will be able to rewire after that stroke, that will also depend, and also the severity of the injury after SCI. So you have to also assume that what kind of recovery we are expecting in that stage, and according, as I told you, you have to ask the patient that whatever he was doing in the past, now after the injury, what he is willing to do with, if he has to left with some kind of disabilities, so what was his goal after that thing, what are the demands. According to that, we have to treat the patient. It depends. As I told you, in paraplegics, you have to focus on sitting balance, dynamic balance. All you want to perform all these irradiation and reinforcement procedures, you have to bring them into the picture. Like you are treating the upper trunk to get facilitation of the lower trunk. I have treated patients with paraplegics below the level of T4. The patient is not able to even sit for a second. After a few sessions, he has started showing improvement. So this is what we can do. And a stroke patient, from the very beginning, it is not only PNF, like in every stage you have to see what approach is going to work appropriately for the patient. You have to choose your approach very wisely according to the goal and demand of the patient. There are a lot of approaches. The rude approach is there, PNF, NDT, MRP, and many more approaches. So you have to choose them. You have left with so many tools. So depending upon the situation, at which stage of recovery the patient is, it is not like that every time PNF is going to work in all the stages of the patient. So if it's related to facilitation of the patient at the very early stage, you might go for a Roots approach. You might go for repetitive stretch, repetitive contraction of PNF principles. You can go for this NDT, normalizing the tone. If the patient is having high tone, you have to use all these approaches in an integrated way. None of the approach is going to work absolutely perfect in bringing all this functional independence if you are talking about patients with different disabilities. Thank you.
So should you suggest any PNF book for the student?
Definitely, Susan Adler, that's the best book for the clinical practice. I can show you. I have to show all those candidates. So I'm following this book. You must have this book. You can see. So this is the latest edition, and this is like a Bible. If you want to learn PNF, want to master yourself in PNF practice, you must have this. This is a little bit costly. It will come around 4,000 to 5,000. You have book from give order from Amazon and Flipkart. But I must tell that this will be worth it. Like it's buying. You won't need any kind of workshop. You need not any want any kind of special courses. If you follow this book thoroughly, if you read this book thoroughly, it has tremendous amount of huge amount of picture demonstrations. Might have videos also. I haven't checked, but this is awesome. Just awesome. Thank you.
Which facilitating technique or inhibitory technique is best for opening and closing of fast and stroke patient, or is there any best approach? Voice is breaking.
The patient voice is breaking. Now it's clear.
Yeah.
Now it's clear.
Yes, you are audible.
Kausikda, can you again repeat the question? I also didn't get the question.
Which facilitating technique or inhibitory technique is best for opening and closing of fast in stroke patient, or other best approach?
Opening of fist.
Yes.
Okay, so opening of fist. So what the patient is doing, the flexors are recruiting at a high intensity. These flexors are recruiting basically. So what you have to do here, you have to inhibit the flexor. So you keep on doing. You can start doing this extension kind of exercise for the wrist. D2 extension pattern. You start with D2 extension pattern. Like if the patient is not allowing to, if the situation, if it's very much spastic, the hand is not getting straightened. If you can't do the pattern with the limbs fully stretched, whatever the limbs is in flexion, elbow flexion, you can just go in this range and just try to give resistance over the extensor side. As I told you, with proper gripping, you provide resistance from the extensor side, little bit of minimum resistance what the patient can overcome. That will help definitely that will help to facilitate the extensors. Once you facilitate the extensors, you can have a little bit of relaxation or inhibition in the flexor side. Or you can ask the patient to do some kind of activity like pushing something, keep something in front of that hand, in table in front of the patient, and ask the patient to push slowly. Like these sort of activities, it will facilitate the triceps and the wrist extensors. You always think of the opposite activity. If the patient is in that kind of situation, what activity will bring inhibition for that side and facilitation of the opposite side? Just think in that way.
Any contraindication and precaution we should take?
Positive, always positive response. If the patient is in pain, we can't approach in this PNF because PNF is all about stretch, traction, approximation. So you can't give a stretch in a very painful situation because you are doing stretch. That muscle is going to pull the tendinous part where the muscle is inserting in the form of tendon. So you have to keep in mind all these things. And resistance, as I told you, you have to go with optimum resistance. Don't start with too much of resistance, and you have to follow by step. You start with rhythmic initiation, passive movement of the pattern. Let the patient follow the stages of motor learning and motor control. You have to respect the stages of motor control and motor learning at every stage. You can't just escape one stage and going to the final stage. This sort of things you have to keep in mind. Thank you.
Please, once again, please name and book of the name and author. Repeat,
Okay.
please.
This is the cover picture. It's the name PNF in edition. PNF in Practice 4th edition by Adler, Beckers and Back. Author's name Adler, Beckers and Buck. PNF in Practice 4th edition and by Springer. So this is the book. You search in Google like PNF in Practice, you will get this picture and
muscle is fully contracted.
Sorry. No more question is in Zoom.
yeah, we have I think we have answered a lot of questions and
Yes.
and this is a very much interesting topic and interesting subject. So we are done with the principles and procedures. As I told you, we are not going into the pattern, as all of the time we are talking into the pattern only, but less of these principles and procedures. So we can keep a next session whenever is possible on the patterns. All these patterns, combination of patterns, there are so many things to tell about, but it is not possible to tell everything and it's not possible to recollect everything. I think whatever we have done today is good enough, and if you can recollect all these things, that will be better. And thanks to all of you for listening to me and coming live this IP YouTube channel. Once again, thanking I'm so much grateful to IP for creating such knowledge hub kind of stuff in this pandemic, such difficult situation when we can learn a lot by sitting back home. Very, very helpful for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Souvik. This is the time for closing. Arinanda, please say something for the closing. Arindam Seth, State Secretary. Arindam, we can hear you.
Thank you, Souvik, for such a nice and such a nice and informative session from you. I am giving out my heartful thanks to the IIP technical team for giving us a nice platform to share the knowledge to the all over the India, and I am giving a thanks to the
I think
connection is
very poor. Okay, no issues. Thank you, Arinanda.
Connection poor.
Thank you, Arinanda. Thank you, technical team. Jaspreet ma'am.
Yes, a lot of thanks to the technical team also. Without their help, this will not be possible. My first experience in the Zoom, and it went so well, except that middle part where my connection went low and some technical glitches were there. Rest, everything was I enjoyed throughout the session. And once again, thanks, wholeheartedly thanks to all IIP team and all the participants who has listened to walk to this talk today.
Okay.
I'm very much grateful to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Souvik. Thank you. Jaspreet ma'am, up to you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Souvik Roy, sir, for this wonderful and informative session.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, West Bengal team, Kaushik Malik, sir, Arindam, sir, Rishi, sir, Tanushri, ma'am, for organizing such wonderful webinars. And again, I request to all the participants, please like and subscribe IIP India YouTube channel and Facebook page. I extended my thanks to Dr. Ruchi, ma'am, and Dr. Sanjeev Jha, sir, providing this platform. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Good night. Good night.
Good night. Good night.